The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Zelda Emerson's back as she stood at the edge of the rocky outcropping, staring at the distant shapes of buildings that made up Challis, Idaho, and felt her stomach twist into knots so tight she thought she might be sick right there on the dusty ground. She had been standing there for nearly an hour, her horse grazing peacefully behind her, oblivious to the turmoil churning through her mind and heart. The year was 1882, and she had traveled 3 days from her family's failing homestead on the outskirts of the territory, carrying with her a burden heavier than any physical weight she had ever known. Her dress, once a respectable gray cotton, was stained with trail dust and sweat. Her dark hair hung in a braid down her back, strands escaping to frame a face that was still young at 22, but had seen more hardship than many women twice her age. The shame burned in her chest like hot coals. She needed supplies desperately. Her younger siblings were depending on her. Her mother, weakened by consumption, could barely get out of bed most days. Her father had died the previous winter, frozen to death when he got caught in a blizzard checking on their meager cattle. That left Zelda as the head of the household, responsible for 3 younger siblings and a dying mother. She had sold nearly everything of value they owned just to make it through spring, and now summer was burning hot and merciless across the Idaho territory. But she could not make herself move toward that town. Everyone in Challis knew what had happened 6 months ago. Everyone knew that Thomas Wickham, the banker's son, had courted her with pretty words and prettier promises. Everyone knew he had convinced her that they would be married come spring. And everyone knew that, when she had given herself to him, believing in those promises with the wholehearted trust of someone who had been raised to see the good in people, he had laughed in her face and married the daughter of the cattle baron instead. The humiliation had been complete and public. Thomas had made sure of that. He had bragged to his friends at the saloon about his conquest, and those friends had whispered to their wives, and those wives had whispered to everyone else. And soon the entire town knew that Zelda Emerson had been ruined by Thomas Wickham, and then cast aside like yesterday's newspaper. She had not been back to Challis since. But now necessity drove her, and necessity cared nothing for shame or pride or the whispers that would surely follow her down every street. Zelda turned to look at her horse, a gentle mare named Betsy who had been her father's pride and joy. The animal looked back at her with liquid brown eyes, and Zelda felt tears prick at her own eyes. She brushed them away angrily. Crying would not help. Crying would not feed her family or buy the medicine her mother needed or put new shoes on her brother's feet before winter came again. She was so lost in her thoughts that she did not hear the rider approaching until he was nearly upon her. Her hand went instinctively to the rifle strapped to her saddle, but she relaxed when she saw it was just a single man on a large roan horse, leading a pack mule behind him. He was tall. She could see that even with him mounted, and he sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. He wore the practical clothing of a working rancher, dark pants and a worn shirt with a vest over it, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the brutal sun. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jaw covered with a few days' worth of stubble. His eyes, when they met hers, were a surprising clear gray, like storm clouds. "Afternoon," he said, his voice deep and pleasant. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect. "Name's Nathan Young. I own a ranch about 5 miles west of here." Zelda nodded stiffly, not sure what to say. She knew the name vaguely. The Young Ranch was one of the more successful operations in the area, though not as large as some of the cattle baronies that dominated the territory. Nathan looked from her to the town in the distance, and then back again. His expression was thoughtful but not judgmental. "Been standing here long." "That's my own business," Zelda said, more sharply than she had intended. Then, because her mother had raised her to be polite even when her world was falling apart, she added, "But thank you for your concern, Mr. Young." He did not take offense at her tone. Instead, he dismounted with a fluid grace and stood a respectful distance away from her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were kind, and there were small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often. "I don't mean to pry, miss. It's just that you look like someone facing down a firing squad rather than a peaceful town on a summer afternoon." Despite herself, Zelda felt a small, bitter smile tug at her lips. "Perhaps it feels much the same to me." Nathan was quiet for a moment, and she could feel him studying her. Not in the way Thomas used to look at her, with that calculating hunger that she had been too naive to recognize for what it was. This was different. This was the look of someone trying to understand a problem so he could figure out how to solve it. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" he asked finally. "Because if you are, I'd be happy to help if I can." Zelda shook her head. "The kind of trouble I'm in nobody can help with. It's already done and can't be undone." She hesitated, then decided she had nothing left to lose. "I need supplies from town. My family needs them. But I can't make myself ride in there and face all those people." Nathan's expression did not change, but she saw something shift in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or sympathy. "Well," he said slowly, "I was planning to head into Challies myself. I could ride with you if you like. Sometimes things are easier when you're not facing them alone." Zelda looked at him sharply, searching for any sign of mockery or ulterior motive. But his face was open and honest, and there was nothing in his demeanor that suggested anything other than a genuine offer of help. Still, she had learned to be suspicious of men and their offers. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to know you to see that you're struggling," Nathan replied simply. "And I was raised to help folks when I can. My mama would have my hide if she knew I rode past someone in need and didn't at least offer." There was something about the way he mentioned his mother, with that mixture of affection and respect, that made Zelda's defenses crack just a little. She thought of her own mother, lying in bed back at their failing homestead, coughing into blood-stained handkerchiefs and trying to pretend she was not dying. "I don't need charity," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm not offering charity," Nathan said. "I'm offering company." "There's a difference." Zelda looked back at the town, then at Nathan, then at the town again. The sun was starting to lower in the sky, and if she did not go now, she would have to make camp and try again tomorrow. And tomorrow would not be any easier than today. Tomorrow her courage might fail her entirely. "All right," she said finally. "I appreciate the offer." Nathan nodded and mounted his horse again. He waited for her to mount Betsy, and then they started down the rocky trail toward Challies together. For the first few minutes, they rode in silence. Zelda was acutely aware of his presence beside her, solid and steady. She kept expecting him to ask her questions, to pry into her business, but he seemed content to simply ride alongside her without demanding anything. Finally, she could not stand the silence anymore. "I suppose you've heard about me," she said, her voice tight. "About what happened with Thomas Wickham." Nathan glanced at her, and she saw surprise in his expression. "Can't say that I have. I don't spend much time in town, and I don't pay much attention to gossip when I'm there." Zelda looked at him incredulously. "You really haven't heard," "Really haven't," Nathan confirmed. "But I'm guessing from the way you're talking that it's not a pleasant story." For a moment, Zelda considered not telling him. But if he was going to ride into town beside her, he would hear it soon enough anyway. Better he hear it from her than from the spiteful whispers of the town gossips. "Thomas Wickham courted me last year," she said, the words coming out flat and hard. "He promised me marriage. He promised me a future. I was stupid enough to believe him. I gave him what a woman should only give her husband, and then he laughed at me and married someone else. Someone with more money and better prospects, and he made sure everyone in Challies knew what I had done." She waited for Nathan's expression to change, waited for the judgment or disgust, or, worse, the predatory interest that sometimes came into men's eyes when they learned a woman had been ruined. But Nathan's expression remained calm and thoughtful. "Sounds to me like Thomas Wickham is a coward and a liar," Nathan said after a moment. "And sounds like you were the victim of a cruel trick." Zelda blinked, startled by his matter-of-fact tone. "Most people don't see it that way. Most people think I'm a fallen woman who got what she deserved." "Then most people are fools," Nathan said simply. "A man who would do that to a woman is no man at all in my book, and anyone who judges you for trusting someone's promises isn't worth your time or concern." Something in Zelda's chest loosened just a little, like a knot being gently untied. She had spent 6 months carrying the weight of everyone's judgment, believing deep down that they were right, that she had been stupid and sinful and deserved everything that had happened to her. To hear someone say, so simply and directly, that she had been the victim rather than the perpetrator was like having a window opened in a stuffy room. "That's kind of you to say," she managed. "It's not kindness," Nathan said. "It's just the truth." They rode on, and Zelda found herself stealing glances at him. He sat his horse with easy confidence, his hands relaxed on the reins, his eyes scanning the landscape with the practiced awareness of someone who had spent his life in wild country. There was something solid about him, something dependable. She found herself wanting to trust him, which frightened her because she had trusted Thomas, and look where that had gotten her. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan spoke again. "You said your family needs supplies. Are you folks homesteading?" Zelda nodded. "My father took up a claim about 5 years ago. It's hard land, rocky and dry. We've managed to scrape by, but it's never been easy. Then my father died last winter and my mother took sick, and now it's just me trying to hold everything together for my younger siblings." "That's a heavy burden for anyone," Nathan said. "How many siblings?" "3. Peter is 14, Mary is 12, and little Samuel is only 8. And you're managing the homestead alone while caring for them and your mother." "I don't have much choice," Zelda said. "There's nobody else." Nathan was quiet for a moment, and she could see him thinking. "What kind of supplies do you need?" "Flour, beans, salt, coffee. Medicine for my mother if I can afford it. Some fabric to make new clothes for the children. They're all growing and their things are falling apart." She paused, then added reluctantly, "I have some money from selling our second cow. It should be enough if I'm careful." They were getting closer to town now, close enough that Zelda could make out individual buildings. Her heart started to pound harder in her chest, and her palms felt sweaty on the reins. Without thinking about it, she slowed her horse. Nathan slowed to match her pace. He looked at her, and his expression was gentle. "It's going to be all right," he said quietly. "You're stronger than you think you are. You wouldn't have made it this far if you weren't." "I don't feel strong," Zelda admitted. "I feel terrified. Courage isn't about not being afraid," Nathan said. "It's about doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid. And you're doing that right now." They reached the edge of town, and Zelda felt her throat tighten. The main street of Challies stretched out before them, dusty and busy with afternoon activity. She could see people moving in and out of the shops, horses tied to hitching posts, a group of men standing outside the saloon. Her instinct was to turn Betsy around and flee back into the wilderness, supplies or no supplies. Then she felt something warm close around her hand, and she looked down in surprise to see that Nathan had reached over and taken her hand in his. His grip was firm and steady, his calloused palm rough against her softer skin. The gesture was so simple and yet so intimate that it shocked her into stillness. "I'm right here," Nathan said, meeting her eyes. "I'm not going to leave you to face this alone. We'll ride in together and we'll get your supplies, and anyone who has something ugly to say can answer to me." "All right." Zelda stared at him, at this man she had met less than an hour ago who was offering her more support and kindness than anyone else had in months. She should pull her hand away. It was improper to hold hands with a man she barely knew, but she found she did not want to. His hand was warm and solid, an anchor in the storm of her fear. "All right," she whispered. They rode into Challies side by side, Nathan still holding her hand. Zelda kept her chin up and her eyes forward, trying not to see the faces turning toward them, trying not to hear the whispers starting up like wind rustling through dry grass. But she could feel Nathan's presence beside her, steady and unwavering, and it gave her the strength to keep riding. The general store was in the middle of town and they dismounted in front of it. Nathan tied both horses to the hitching post, his movements calm and unhurried. When he turned to Zelda, she saw that he was still holding her hand, and he gave it a gentle squeeze before releasing it. "Ready?" he asked. Zelda took a deep breath and nodded. The inside of the store was dim and cool after the bright heat outside. The proprietor, a thin man named Harold Parsons, looked up from behind the counter. His eyes widened when he saw Zelda, and she saw his expression shift through several emotions in quick succession: surprise, recognition, and then a sort of sneering satisfaction that made her stomach turn. "Well, well," Parsons said, his voice carrying clearly through the store. "Zelda Emerson. Haven't seen you around here in quite some time." Zelda felt her face flush hot, but before she could respond, Nathan stepped forward. His voice when he spoke was pleasant, but carried an edge that made Parsons straighten up slightly. "The lady needs supplies," Nathan said. "I expect she'll get the same fair prices and courteous service that any other customer would receive." Parsons looked at Nathan, clearly trying to place him. When he recognized him, his demeanor changed slightly. "Of course, Mr. Young. I wasn't suggesting otherwise." Nathan nodded. "Glad to hear it." He turned to Zelda. "Why don't you tell Mr. Parsons what you need?" Zelda recited her list, her voice steady despite the trembling she felt inside. Parsons gathered the items, and as he worked, two women entered the store. Zelda recognized them immediately: Mrs. Whitmore and Mrs. Fletcher, two of the biggest gossips in Challies. She saw their eyes light up when they spotted her, saw them lean their heads together to whisper. Nathan saw it too. He moved closer to Zelda, not quite touching her but near enough that his presence was clearly protective. When Mrs. Whitmore opened her mouth to speak, Nathan turned and looked directly at her, and whatever she saw in his expression made her snap her mouth shut again. The supplies were gathered and the total calculated. Zelda counted out her money carefully, making sure she had enough left over for the medicine. Parsons took it with barely concealed disdain, and Zelda had to bite her tongue to keep from saying something she would regret. Nathan helped her carry the supplies out to the horses. They packed them carefully on Betsy, distributing the weight evenly. All the while, Zelda could feel eyes on them, could hear the whispers following them like shadows. But having Nathan there made it bearable. More than bearable, really. It made her feel like she was not alone in the world, like she had an ally. "There's one more stop I need to make," Zelda said quietly. "The doctor's office. My mother needs medicine." Nathan nodded. "Lead the way." The doctor's office was at the far end of town. Dr. Morrison was an older man, one of the few people in Challies who had always treated Zelda with basic human decency. He listened to her description of her mother's symptoms and sold her a bottle of tonic that he said might help with the cough and the pain, though they both knew there was no real cure for consumption. As they left the doctor's office, they nearly collided with Thomas Wickham. Zelda froze. She had not seen him since that terrible day when he had told her she had been a fool to believe him. He looked the same as he always had, handsome in a polished way, with smooth blonde hair and expensive clothes that marked him as someone of means. He was with his wife, a pale, pretty girl named Constance who looked like she had never worked a day in her life. Thomas's eyes widened when he saw Zelda, and then a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Zelda Emerson, what a surprise. I didn't think you had the nerve to show your face in town anymore. Zelda felt the blood drain from her face, but before she could respond, Nathan stepped between them. His movement was not aggressive, but it was definitive, blocking Thomas's view of Zelda. I don't believe we've been introduced, Nathan said, his voice cold. Though from what I've heard, I don't think I want to be. A man who would treat a woman the way you treated Miss Emerson isn't worth my time or respect. Thomas's smile faltered. I don't know what she's told you, but she told me the truth, Nathan interrupted. That you made promises you never intended to keep, that you used her and then threw her away. That's the action of a coward, not a man. Constance was looking between them with wide eyes, clearly sensing that something significant was happening but not quite understanding what. Thomas's face had gone red, and Zelda could see anger flashing in his eyes. You don't know anything about it, Thomas said, his voice rising. She was easy prey, and he did not get to finish the sentence. Nathan's fist caught him square in the jaw, and Thomas went down hard on the dusty street. Several people nearby gasped, and Zelda heard Constance let out a small shriek. Nathan stood over Thomas, his hands clenched at his sides. If I ever hear you speak about Miss Emerson that way again, he said quietly, you'll get worse than that. And if you ever come near her or her family, I'll make sure you regret it. Are we clear? Thomas, still on the ground with blood trickling from his split lip, nodded weakly. Nathan turned away from him as if he was not worth another moment's thought. He took Zelda's arm gently. Come on, he said. Let's get out of here. They walked back to the horses, and Zelda was dimly aware of the stares and whispers following them, but something had shifted. Instead of judgment in the eyes of the watchers, she saw speculation and a sort of grudging respect. A man defending a woman's honor was the stuff of stories out here in the West, and Nathan had just made it clear that he considered Zelda worth defending. They mounted their horses and rode out of town. Zelda was shaking, though whether from fear or relief or something else entirely, she could not say. They rode for several minutes in silence before Nathan spoke. I'm sorry about that, he said. I shouldn't have hit him. But hearing him talk about you that way, I just couldn't stand by and let it happen. Don't apologize, Zelda said, her voice stronger than she expected. He deserved it. He deserved worse than that, honestly. They continued riding, and as the town fell away behind them, Zelda felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. She had done it. She had gone into Challies, faced down her shame, and come out the other side, and she had not done it alone. When they reached the outcropping where they had first met, Zelda pulled Betsy to a stop. Nathan stopped beside her, looking at her with those clear gray eyes. Thank you, Zelda said, and her voice was thick with emotion. Not just for helping me with the supplies or for hitting Thomas, though I appreciate those things. Thank you for treating me like I was worth something, like I was still a person deserving of respect and kindness. I had forgotten what that felt like. Nathan's expression was serious. You are worth something, Zelda. Don't ever doubt that. What happened to you wasn't your fault, and it doesn't define who you are. Zelda felt tears prick at her eyes again, But this time they were not tears of shame or fear. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something else she could not quite name yet. "My homestead is about a 2-hour ride northwest from here," she said. "Would you like to come for supper? It won't be much, but it's the least I can do to thank you properly." Nathan smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and more carefree. "I'd like that very much." They rode together as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Zelda found herself talking to Nathan in a way she had not talked to anyone in months. She told him about her father, about the dreams he had for their homestead that had died with him in the snow. She told him about her siblings, about Peter's determination to be the man of the family, about Mary's love of books despite having almost none to read, about little Samuel's fascination with the horses and cattle. She told him about her mother, about watching her slowly waste away and being powerless to stop it. Nathan listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making observations that showed he was really hearing her, not just waiting for his turn to talk. In turn, he told her about his ranch, about the years of hard work he had put into building it from nothing. He told her about losing his own father to a range war 5 years ago, about his mother who lived with him and helped run the household, about his younger sister who had married and moved to Oregon. By the time they reached the Emerson homestead, Zelda felt like she had known Nathan for years instead of hours. The homestead itself was modest to the point of poverty. A small cabin with a sod roof, a lean-to barn that looked like it might collapse in the next strong wind, a small corral with a few scrawny chickens pecking at the ground. The land around it was rocky and sparse, more suited to grazing than farming, but her father had tried to farm it anyway. Peter came running out when he heard the horses. He was tall for 14, with the gangly awkwardness of a boy not quite grown into his frame. His clothes were patched and too small, and his face was wary as he took in Nathan's presence. "It's all right," Zelda said quickly. "This is Nathan Young. He helped me in town. Mr. Young, this is my brother Peter." Peter relaxed slightly and nodded to Nathan. "Ma's been asking for you," he said to Zelda. "She's had a rough day." Zelda's heart sank. "I have medicine for her. Help me unpack these supplies and then I'll go see her." Mary and Samuel emerged from the cabin, drawn by the sound of voices. Mary was a quiet girl with dark hair like Zelda's, her eyes too old for her 12 years. Samuel was small and thin, but his face lit up when he saw the horses. They all worked together to unpack the supplies and put them away. Zelda noticed Nathan watching her family with thoughtful eyes, taking in the poverty and hardship that marked every aspect of their lives. But there was no judgment in his gaze, only what looked like concern and perhaps a hint of admiration. Once the supplies were stored, Zelda went into the cabin to see her mother. The interior was dim and close, the single room divided by blankets hung on ropes to create a semblance of privacy. Her mother lay on a narrow bed in one corner, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes. But she smiled when she saw Zelda. "You went to town," she said, her voice weak but pleased. "I was worried you wouldn't be able to." "I had help," Zelda said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her mother's thin hand. "A rancher named Nathan Young rode with me. He's outside now. I invited him for supper." Her mother's eyes sharpened slightly, some of their old sparkle returning. "Did you now? That was kind of him to help you, and kind of you to invite him." Zelda felt her cheeks warm. "It was just the polite thing to do, Mama." "Of course it was," her mother said, but there was a knowing look in her eyes that made Zelda blush harder. She gave her mother the medicine, helping her swallow the thick liquid. Her mother made a face but did not complain. When Zelda emerged from the cabin, She found Nathan helping Peter repair a broken section of the corral fence. He worked with practiced ease, his strong hands guiding the wood into place while Peter held it steady. Mary was starting a fire in the outdoor cooking pit, and Samuel was watching Nathan with open fascination. Zelda joined Mary, and together they began preparing a simple meal of beans and cornbread. It was not much, but it was what they had, and Nathan did not seem to mind. They ate as the sun set, sitting on logs around the fire. The children were shy at first, but Nathan had a way of talking to them that put them at ease. He asked Peter about the homestead, treating the boys' opinions seriously instead of dismissing them the way many men would. He asked Mary about her schooling, and when she admitted she had not been able to attend in over a year, he promised to bring her some books from his ranch. He showed Samuel how to whistle through a blade of grass, and the boys' delighted laughter rang out across the darkening landscape. Zelda watched all this and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It was not the giddy infatuation she had felt for Thomas, that had been shallow and based on pretty words and promises. This was something different, something deeper. It was based on actions, on kindness, on seeing a man interact with her family and recognizing in him the qualities that really mattered. When the meal was finished and the children had been sent to bed, Nathan and Zelda sat by the dying fire. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by any town lights, stretching from horizon to horizon in a river of silver. "Your family is wonderful," Nathan said quietly. "Those are good kids. You've done well by them." "I'm doing the best I can," Zelda said. "But some days I worry it's not enough. The homestead is failing. I don't know how we're going to make it through another winter." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the embers. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "I meant what I said in town, Zelda. You're worth something, you and your family. And I'd like to help if you'll let me." Zelda looked at him sharply. "I can't take charity." "Not charity," Nathan said. "Let me finish before you decide. My ranch does well, but I could use help. My mother's getting older, and the work of running a household is hard on her. And I could use another hand with the cattle and the horses, someone I could train up. Peter's young, but he's willing, I can see that." He turned to look at her directly. "What I'm proposing is this. You and your family come to my ranch. Your mother can rest and receive proper care. Mary can help my mother with the household work, and Samuel can help with the small tasks. Peter can work with me, learn ranching, and you can help with the horses. I notice the way you handle your mare. You've got a gift with animals." Zelda stared at him. "You're offering us jobs, all of us." "I'm offering you a chance," Nathan said. "A chance to get out from under this failing homestead, to give your family a real future. You'd all earn your keep. This wouldn't be charity. And when your mother—" He paused delicately. "When the time comes that she's no longer with you, well, we can figure out what comes next, but at least she'd be comfortable until then." Zelda's throat felt tight. "Why would you do this for us? You barely know us." Nathan looked away, back at the fire. "Because I know what it's like to struggle alone. Because I know what it's like to lose a parent and have to take on more than you're ready for. Because I believe in helping people when I can." He paused, then added quietly, "And because I'd like to get to know you better, Zelda. You're one of the strongest, most courageous women I've ever met, and I want to spend more time with you." Zelda's heart was pounding. She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to grab onto this lifeline with both hands. But she had learned to be cautious, had learned that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "I need to think about it," she said finally, "and talk to my mother." "Of course," Nathan said. "Take all the time you need. I'll come back in a few days to hear your answer if that's all right." "That's all right," Zelda said. Nathan stood, and Zelda stood with him. They walked to where his horse was tied, and Nathan prepared to mount. But before he did, he turned to her. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I want you to know that today, riding into town with you, holding your hand, it meant something to me. I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time, maybe ever. I'm not going to rush you or push you. I know you've got reasons to be cautious around men. But I want you to know that I'm not Thomas Wickham. I'm not interested in using you or hurting you. I'm interested in building something real, if you'll give me the chance." Zelda felt her breath catch. She looked up into his face, into those clear gray eyes, and saw only honesty there. "I believe you," she whispered. Nathan smiled, and then, very gently, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered for just a moment against her cheek, and Zelda felt warmth spread through her entire body. "Good night, Zelda," he said softly. "Good night, Nathan." She watched him ride away into the darkness, watched until even the sound of his horse's hoofbeats had faded. Then she went back to the cabin, her mind whirling with possibilities and hopes she had thought were dead forever. Her mother was still awake, propped up on pillows. She looked at Zelda with knowing eyes. "Tell me about this Nathan Young," she said. So Zelda did. She told her mother everything, from their meeting at the outcropping to his offer of work at his ranch. Her mother listened quietly, occasionally asking a question, her expression thoughtful. When Zelda finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What does your heart tell you to do?" "My heart tells me to say yes," Zelda admitted. "But my heart led me astray with Thomas. I don't know if I can trust it anymore." "Your heart didn't lead you astray," her mother said firmly. "Thomas led you astray. He lied to you, and that's not your fault. Don't let what he did stop you from opening your heart again, especially not to someone who seems worthy of it." "How can you be sure Nathan is worthy?" Zelda asked. "I can't be completely sure," her mother said. "But I can tell you this. A man's character shows in his actions, not his words. Thomas was all pretty words with no substance behind them. Nathan is all actions. He rode with you into town knowing you were facing shame and judgment. He held your hand. He defended you. He offered to help your entire family without asking for anything in return except your company and the chance to know you better. Those are the actions of a good man, Zelda." Zelda felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I'm so afraid, Mama, afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of making another mistake." Her mother reached out and took Zelda's hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so ill. "Living in fear is no way to live, my darling. Sometimes you have to take a chance on something good, even when you're scared. And I think Nathan Young might be something very good indeed." Over the next few days, Zelda thought about Nathan's offer constantly. She weighed the practical benefits, the stability it would give her family, the chance for her siblings to have better futures. But more than that, she thought about Nathan himself, about the way he had made her feel seen and valued, about the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. She talked to Peter, who was enthusiastic about the prospect of learning real ranching from an established rancher. She talked to Mary, who was excited about the possibility of helping with a household and maybe getting access to books again. Even Samuel, when she tried to explain it in terms he could understand, seemed pleased at the idea of more horses and animals. When Nathan returned 3 days later, riding up to the homestead in the late afternoon, Zelda had her answer ready. He dismounted and stood before her, his hat in his hands, his expression hopeful but guarded. "Have you thought about my offer?" he asked. "I have," Zelda said. "And if the offer still stands, my family and I would like to accept it." Nathan's face broke into a wide smile, and Zelda felt her own face mirroring his. "It definitely still stands," he said. "When can you be ready to move?" "We don't have much to pack," Zelda said. "We could be ready by tomorrow if that's not too soon." "Tomorrow is perfect," Nathan said. He spent the rest of that day helping them prepare. He had brought a wagon, knowing they would need it to transport their few belongings and Zelda's mother. He helped Peter pack up their tools and what little furniture they had. He was gentle and respectful with her mother, helping to arrange a comfortable pallet in the wagon bed so the journey would not be too hard on her. That night, for the last time, the Emerson family slept in the cabin that had been their home for 5 years. Zelda lay awake, listening to the familiar sounds of the night, feeling both sad to leave this place where her father's dreams had lived and died, and hopeful for what the future might bring. They set out at dawn the next morning. Nathan drove the wagon with Zelda's mother in the back, while Zelda and Peter rode their horses, and the younger children sat with their mother in the wagon. The journey to the young ranch took most of the day, following a trail that led west through rolling grasslands and stands of pine trees. As they traveled, Nathan told Zelda about his ranch. He had 500 acres of good grazing land, a solid house with real wood floors and glass windows, a barn that could hold 20 horses, and a herd of about 200 cattle. He employed 2 ranch hands who lived in a bunkhouse, and his mother lived in the main house. "My mother can be a bit gruff," Nathan warned. "She's a strong woman who's had a hard life, but she's fair and she's got a good heart. She'll like you." Zelda felt nervous about meeting Nathan's mother, but she tried not to let it show. She wanted to make a good impression, wanted this chance to work out for her family's sake as much as her own. They reached the young ranch in the late afternoon. Zelda's first sight of it took her breath away. After the poverty of their homestead, the young ranch looked prosperous and solid. The main house was a sprawling structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. The barn was huge and well-maintained, and the fences were all in good repair. She could see cattle grazing in the distance and horses in a corral near the barn. A woman emerged from the house as they approached. She was in her 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with gray-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was weathered and stern, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. This was clearly Nathan's mother, and Zelda could see the resemblance in the set of their jaws and the shape of their eyes. "So this is them," the woman said, looking over Zelda and her family with an assessing gaze. "Ma, this is Zelda Emerson and her family," Nathan said. "Zelda, this is my mother, Nora Young." Zelda dismounted and approached Nora, trying to stand straight and confident despite her nervousness. "Thank you for welcoming us to your home, Mrs. Young. We're grateful for the opportunity." Nora studied her for a long moment, and Zelda forced herself not to look away. Finally, Nora nodded. "Nathan's told me about your situation. Takes strength to keep a family together after losing a father. I respect that. You'll work hard here, but you'll be treated fairly. Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable," Zelda said. "We're all willing to work hard." Nora's stern expression softened just slightly. "Good. Now let's get your mother into the house. Nathan says she's poorly. We've prepared a room for her on the ground floor so she won't have to manage stairs." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Zelda's mother was settled into a comfortable room with an actual feather mattress and real curtains on the window. She looked overwhelmed by the luxury of it, tears streaming down her face as she thanked Nora repeatedly. The children were shown to the room they would share, larger than the entire cabin they had been living in. Zelda was given a small room of her own, simple but clean, with a real bed and a washstand. As evening fell, they all gathered in the kitchen for supper. Nora had prepared a feast by the Emerson standards: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and even a pie made from preserved apples. The children ate with obvious delight, and Zelda had to remind them not to make themselves sick by eating too quickly. After supper, Nathan showed Peter and Zelda around the ranch. He introduced them to his two ranch hands, a grizzled older man named Buck and a younger man named Tom, both of whom seemed friendly enough if a bit reserved. He showed them the barn, the cattle, the horses. Peter was practically vibrating with excitement at seeing everything. And even Zelda, who had grown up around livestock, was impressed by the quality and number of animals. When they finally had a moment alone, walking back from the barn to the house under a sky full of stars, Nathan turned to Zelda. "I know this is all new and probably overwhelming," he said, "but I want you to know that you're not just an employee here. You're not just someone I'm helping. I meant what I said before. I care about you, Zelda. I want to see where this can go between us." Zelda's heart was pounding. In the short time she had known Nathan, he had been nothing but kind and honest and true. He had defended her, supported her, offered her family a lifeline when they were drowning. And more than that, he made her feel things she had thought she would never feel again. Hope, attraction, the possibility of love. "I care about you too," she said quietly. "You scare me a little, if I'm being honest. Not because you're frightening, but because I'm afraid of feeling this much for someone again. I'm afraid of being hurt." Nathan reached out and took her hand, just as he had done that day when they rode into Challies together. "I can't promise you that life will always be easy," he said. "But I can promise you that I will never intentionally hurt you. I will never lie to you or use you or throw you away. You're too precious for that, Zelda. You're worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth cherishing. And if you'll give me the chance, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Zelda looked up at him, at his handsome face so earnest in the starlight, and felt the last of her walls crumbling. "I'd like that," she whispered. Nathan smiled, and then, very slowly, giving her every chance to pull away if she wanted to, he leaned down and kissed her. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, not demanding but asking, and Zelda felt something inside her bloom like a flower opening to the sun. She kissed him back, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his hand still holding hers tightly. "I'm going to court you properly," he said. "I'm going to do this right. No rushing, no pressure. I want you to be absolutely sure." "I'm already sure," Zelda said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I know it's fast. I know it seems crazy after what happened with Thomas. But this feels different. You feel different. You feel real." "I am real," Nathan said, "and I'm not going anywhere." The next weeks settled into a pattern that felt almost like a dream to Zelda. She woke each morning in a real bed in a house that did not leak when it rained. She worked with the horses, and discovered she had a real talent for gentling the wild ones Nathan bought to train for sale. Peter threw himself into learning ranching, shadowing Nathan from dawn to dusk, and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Mary helped Nora with the household tasks, and proved to be a quick learner with cooking and sewing. Samuel became the ranch's unofficial mascot, charming everyone with his enthusiasm and curiosity. And Zelda's mother, freed from the constant stress and labor of the failing homestead, actually seemed to improve a little. She spent her days resting, eating regular meals and watching her children flourish. She and Nora became unexpected friends, two strong women who had both faced hardship and loss and come out the other side still standing. Nathan courted Zelda with a steady patience that she found both endearing and occasionally frustrating. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. He took her riding in the evenings, showing her the beauty of his land. He talked to her about everything and nothing, sharing his dreams and fears and hopes. He made her laugh, something she had not done much of in the past year. and he never pushed her physically beyond what she was comfortable with. There were gentle kisses, his hand holding hers, moments of closeness that made her heart race. But he was always respectful, always careful, always making sure she felt safe and valued. 2 months after the Emerson family arrived at the young ranch, Nathan proposed. It was evening, and they were sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the mountains. He took her hand, and when she turned to look at him, he pulled a simple gold ring from his pocket. "Zelda Emerson," he said, "you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You walked into my life like a miracle, and every day since has been better for having you in it. I love you with everything I have, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" Zelda felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Nathan slipped the ring on her finger, and then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Zelda saw that Nora and her mother were watching from the window, both of them smiling. They were married a month later in a small ceremony in Challies. Zelda was nervous about returning to the town, even for this happy occasion, but Nathan held her hand as they rode in together, just as he had done that first day, and his presence gave her strength. The ceremony was held in the small church at the edge of town, and to Zelda's surprise, it was well attended. Word had spread about how Nathan Young had defended Zelda Emerson's honor and taken in her struggling family. Public opinion had shifted in the way it sometimes did in small communities. Where once she had been scorned and pitied, now she was seen as a woman who had been wronged but had landed on her feet. Thomas Wickham did not attend, though Zelda heard he had left Challies entirely, driven out by his own wife who had discovered his many infidelities and divorced him in a public scandal that made Zelda's own shame look minor by comparison. Zelda felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a relief that he was gone and would not cast his shadow over her new life. Zelda wore a simple dress of blue cotton that Nora and Mary had sewn for her, with wildflowers in her hair. Nathan wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes shining as he watched her walk down the aisle toward him. Her mother, too weak to walk but determined to be there, watched from a chair in the front row, tears of joy streaming down her face. The vows were traditional, but when Nathan said, "I do," he looked into Zelda's eyes and added quietly, "Forever, Zelda. I'm yours forever." And when Zelda said, "I do," she meant it with every fiber of her being. The kiss they shared at the altar was chaste and proper for such a public setting, but it held the promise of everything to come. There was a small reception at the saloon, which the owner had offered to host free of charge as a wedding gift. The townspeople who attended congratulated them, and if some of the congratulations were tinged with the awkwardness of people who had once judged Zelda harshly, well, she was gracious enough to accept them anyway. She was too happy to hold grudges. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, just the two of them, leaving the children to return with Nora in the wagon. Nathan had arranged for them to have the house to themselves for the night, with Nora and the children staying in the bunkhouse with Buck and Tom. The house was quiet when they entered, lit by oil lamps that cast warm, golden light. Nathan took Zelda's hand and led her to the bedroom they would now share, the largest room in the house with a big bed and windows that looked out over the mountains. Once inside, with the door closed behind them, Zelda felt suddenly nervous. She had been with a man before, but that experience had been tainted by Thomas's cruelty and lies. This was different. This was her wedding night with a man she loved, a man who loved her in return. Nathan seemed to sense her nervousness. He cupped her face in his hands gently. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said softly. "We have the rest of our lives. There's no rush." But Zelda shook her head. "I want this," she said. "I want you. I'm just nervous because the last time I was with someone, it ended so badly." "I'm not him," Nathan said firmly. "And this isn't going to be like that. This is about love and respect and two people joining their lives together. Let me show you what it should be like, Zelda. Let me show you how precious you are to me." And he did. He was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she was comfortable and willing every step of the way. Where Thomas had been selfish and rough, Nathan was generous and tender. He kissed her like she was something precious, touched her like she was breakable and valuable all at once. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, it was nothing like what Zelda had experienced before. This was beautiful and intimate and right. Two people expressing their love in the most physical way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, the sheets pooled around them, the lamp turned low. Nathan traced lazy patterns on Zelda's bare shoulder, and she felt more content than she could remember being in her entire life. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Don't be scared," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Love isn't something to be afraid of, not when it's real and true like this." "Did you know?" Zelda asked. "That first day when you saw me standing at the outcropping, looking down at Challies, did you know that we would end up here?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I didn't know," he said finally, "but I hoped. From the moment I saw you standing there trying to find the courage to face your shame, I knew you were someone special, someone worth knowing. And then when I talked to you, when I heard your story and saw your strength, I knew I wanted you in my life. However I could have you, friend or more. I just knew I didn't want to let you go." Zelda turned in his arms to face him, propping herself up on one elbow to look down at him. "You saved me," she said. "You and your mother and this ranch. You saved my whole family." "No," Nathan said, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You saved yourself. You were the one who had the courage to go to town that day, even though you were terrified. You were the one who kept your family together after your father died. You were the one who did what needed to be done, over and over, even when it was hard. I just gave you a hand to hold while you did it." Zelda felt tears prick at her eyes again. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "You don't have to deserve love," Nathan said. "That's not how it works. Love is a gift freely given. And you are so easy to love, Zelda. You're brave and strong and kind. You're a wonderful sister and daughter. You're gentle with the horses and patient with your siblings. You're everything I ever wanted and things I didn't even know I needed." They kissed again, slow and sweet, and then they made love again, this time without any nervousness or hesitation, just joy and passion and the deep certainty that they belonged together. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Zelda's life. She settled fully into her role as Nathan's wife and as a vital part of the ranch. Her skill with horses became well known in the region, and people started bringing their difficult animals to her to gentle. She took pride in the work, in transforming wild, frightened creatures into calm, trusting partners. Peter continued to grow and learn, becoming a skilled ranch hand. At 15, he was doing the work of a man, and Nathan treated him as such, trusting him with real responsibility. Mary bloomed under Nora's patient teaching, becoming an excellent cook and seamstress. Samuel, at 9, was still young but already showed promise as a horseman. And Zelda's mother, surrounded by her children and grandchild to come, lived through Christmas into the new year of 1883. She got to see Zelda's belly begin to swell with her first child, got to see her daughter truly happy and secure. She died peacefully in her sleep in February, with all her children around her, knowing they were safe and loved and provided for. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a pine tree where she could rest in the shade. Zelda grieved, but it was clean grief, unmarred by guilt or regret. Her mother had died knowing her children were safe, and that was a gift. In late summer of 1883, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James Nathan Young, James after Zelda's father and Nathan as his middle name. Nathan cried when he held his son for the first time, and Zelda fell even more deeply in love with her husband seeing him cradling their child with such tenderness. Peter, Mary, and Samuel doted on their nephew, fighting over who got to hold him. Nora was a devoted grandmother, often found rocking James to sleep while humming old songs from her own childhood. Life continued its rhythm. The ranch prospered under Nathan's capable management and Zelda's contributions. They added onto the house, building more rooms to accommodate their growing family. In 1885, Zelda gave birth to twin daughters, Rebecca and Ruth, who had their mother's dark hair and their father's gray eyes. In 1887, another son arrived, William, who looked like a perfect blend of both parents. Peter, at 19, married a local girl named Sarah and built a small house on the ranch property, continuing to work alongside Nathan. Mary, at 17, caught the eye of the school teacher in Challies, a kind young man named David who courted her properly and won Nora's approval. Samuel declared he wanted to be a horse trainer like his sister and began learning the trade from Zelda in earnest. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of children growing. The pain and shame of what Thomas Wickham had done to Zelda faded until it was just a distant memory, something that had happened to a different person in a different life. When she thought of it at all, it was with a sort of detached gratitude, because if Thomas had not been a lying scoundrel, she might have married him and never found Nathan. She might never have experienced real love, never built this beautiful life. On a summer evening in 1892, Zelda and Nathan sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the mountains just as they had done on the evening of their engagement 10 years earlier. Their children were playing in the yard under Nora's watchful eye. Peter's wife, Sarah, was pregnant with their second child. Mary and David were visiting with their young daughter. Samuel, now 17 and tall, was working in the barn with Buck. Nathan reached over and took Zelda's hand, just as he had done so many times before. She looked at him and saw that his hair was starting to show threads of silver at the temples, and there were deeper lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same clear gray they had always been, still looking at her with the same love and devotion. "You remember the day we met?" Nathan asked. "When I found you standing at that outcropping, too ashamed to enter town." "I remember," Zelda said. "I remember thinking my life was over, that I had nothing left but struggle and shame." "And instead you had everything ahead of you," Nathan said. "We both did." Zelda squeezed his hand. "You held my hand that day when we rode into Challies. You didn't have to do that. You could have just ridden away and left me to face it alone." "I could never have done that," Nathan said. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were important. I knew you were going to change my life, and I was right." "We changed each other's lives," Zelda said. "You gave me back my dignity when I thought it was gone forever. You gave my family a home and a future. You gave me love when I thought I wasn't worthy of it." "You were always worthy," Nathan said firmly. "Always, Zelda. Don't ever doubt that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The sounds of their children's laughter drifted up from the yard. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A horse whinnied from the barn. These were the sounds of home, of family, of a life well lived. "I'm so glad I decided to go to town that day," Zelda said softly. "I almost didn't. I almost turned around and went home, but something made me keep going, and then there you were." "Fate," Nathan said. "Or providence, or luck. Whatever you want to call it, I'm grateful for it every single day." Zelda leaned her head against his shoulder, and Nathan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They watched the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, all the precious moments that made up a life together. In the years that followed, the pattern continued. The ranch grew and prospered. James grew into a serious, responsible young man who took after his father in temperament and his mother in his way with horses. The twins, Rebecca and Ruth, were inseparable and clever, always getting into mischief but never any real trouble. William was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, talking about maybe becoming a lawyer someday. Peter and Sarah had 4 children in total, building their own legacy on the land. Mary and David had 3, and Mary made sure all of them learned to read and write well, passing on the love of learning that she had developed despite her own limited education. Samuel eventually married a spirited young woman named Grace, who shared his passion for horses, and together they established a respected horse training operation that drew clients from all over the Idaho Territory. Nora lived to see all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren born, a fierce and loving matriarch who ruled the family with kindness and common sense. When she finally passed in 1898 at the age of 72, she died in her sleep surrounded by family, just as she would have wanted. Nathan and Zelda aged together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered the storms that life brought, droughts and harsh winters, the occasional illness or injury, the normal struggles of raising a large family. But they weathered them together, hand in hand, just as they had ridden into Challies together all those years ago. In the spring of 1910, Nathan and Zelda celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary. They were both in their 50s now, Nathan with more silver than dark in his hair, Zelda with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, and a few strands of gray in her dark braid. But they were healthy and strong, still active in running the ranch that had become one of the most successful in the region. Their children were all grown and settled. James, at 27, had taken over most of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, working alongside his father but increasingly making his own decisions. The twins, at 25, were both married with families of their own. William, at 23, had indeed become a lawyer and practiced in Boise, though he visited the ranch often, bringing his young wife and infant son. Peter, now 46, was a respected cattleman in his own right, his children grown or nearly grown. Mary, at 43, was a grandmother herself, still living in Challies with her teacher husband, still making sure every child in their extended family learned to love books. Samuel, at 35, had built his horse training operation into a thriving business, known throughout Idaho and beyond for the quality of his work. On their anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were more than 30 people there, spread across 3 generations, all connected by the love that had started with a chance meeting on a rocky trail overlooking Challies. As evening fell and the younger children were put to bed, the adults gathered on the porch and in the yard, talking and laughing. Someone brought out a fiddle, and there was music and dancing. Nathan led Zelda in a slow waltz on the porch, moving with the easy familiarity of 2 people who had been partners for decades. James stood to make a toast, raising his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying clearly. who taught us that love is built on respect and kindness, that family is the most important thing, and that the best way to face any challenge is together, hand in hand. Everyone raised their glasses and echoed the toast. Nathan and Zelda looked at each other, both of them with tears in their eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty of what they had built together. Later, when the party had wound down and most of the family had dispersed to their various homes or guest rooms, Nathan and Zelda walked out to the hillside where Zelda's mother was buried. They stood there in the moonlight, looking down at the ranch spread out below them. "Do you think she would be proud?" Zelda asked. "My mother, I mean. Do you think she would be happy with how everything turned out?" "I know she would be," Nathan said. "She knew you were going to be all right. She knew we were right for each other before we even knew it ourselves." Zelda smiled, remembering her mother's knowing look in those final years. She did, didn't she? She always was perceptive. They stood there for a while longer, then walked back down to the house that had become so much more than just a building. It was a home, filled with love and memory and the echoes of laughter from 3 generations of children who had grown up safe and secure within its walls. In bed that night, Nathan pulled Zelda close. 28 years, he said, and I love you more now than I did the day we married." "I love you more too," Zelda said. "I didn't think that was possible, but it is. My love for you just keeps growing year after year." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that day?" Nathan asked. "If I had ridden past before you got there, or if you had turned back before I arrived?" "I try not to think about it," Zelda admitted, "because the thought of my life without you in it is unbearable. You are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. I can't imagine existing in a world where we didn't find each other." "We were always going to find each other," Nathan said with certainty. "One way or another, because some things are just meant to be." The years continued to pass, as years always do. Nathan and Zelda grew older. Their children had grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive. They scaled back their work as age made the physical labor harder, but they remained involved, offering guidance and wisdom to the younger generation. In 1920, they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their immediate family. Nathan was 64 now, Zelda 60. Their hair was white, their faces lined with age, but their love was as strong as ever. They sat on the porch, in the same spot where they had sat so many times over the decades, watching the sun set over the mountains. Nathan still held Zelda's hand, his grip not as strong as it once was, but just as warm, just as sure. "I never thanked you properly," Zelda said suddenly. Nathan looked at her in surprise. "Thank me for what?" "For holding my hand that day," Zelda said. "When we rode into Challies together, you took my hand and you held it and you gave me the strength to face what I needed to face. That was the moment I started to fall in love with you, I think." That simple gesture of support and solidarity, you didn't have to do that. It wasn't proper, we had just met. But you did it anyway because you knew I needed it. Nathan brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I would do it again," he said. "I would do it 1,000 times over." Holding your hand and helping you through that difficult moment led to this, to us, to our family, to this beautiful life we've built together. I would hold your hand through anything, Zelda. In joy and in sorrow, in triumph and in struggle, that's what love is. Being willing to hold someone's hand and face whatever comes together. "I know," Zelda said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've been holding my hand for 38 years. Through the births of our children, through the death of my mother, through droughts and storms and all the challenges of building a life. You've never let go. And I never will," Nathan promised. "Not until death parts us, and even then, I'll be waiting for you on the other side, ready to take your hand again." They kissed, sweet and gentle, a kiss that held decades of love and devotion and partnership. Then they sat together in the gathering darkness, hand in hand, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Idaho sky. The story of Nathan and Zelda became something of a legend in the family and in the region. It was the story grandparents told their grandchildren, the example held up of what real love looked like. It was the story of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, when one needed saving and the other needed someone to save. It was the story of courage and kindness, of trust rebuilt and love that conquered shame. Nathan lived to be 73, dying peacefully in 1929 with Zelda holding his hand, just as he had held hers so many times. His last words were, "I love you, Zelda. Thank you for giving me the most beautiful life." Zelda mourned him deeply, but not without hope. She had learned long ago that love did not die when a person did. She lived another 10 years, dying at 79 in 1939, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a matriarch who had built a dynasty of love. Before she died, she asked to be buried next to Nathan on the hillside overlooking the ranch, next to her mother and Nora, where all the people who had made her life meaningful could rest together. At her funeral, James, now 56 and a grandfather himself, told the story one more time. He told about the young woman standing at the edge of town, too ashamed to enter. He told about the rancher who rode beside her and held her hand. He told about courage and kindness and love that transformed lives. And he told about the legacy they had left behind. A family that spanned generations, a ranch that had prospered for decades, and the lesson that the greatest power in the world is two people deciding to face life's challenges hand in hand. The young ranch continued for many more years, passed down through the generations, always with the memory of Nathan and Zelda at its heart. And on the hillside overlooking the ranch, under the shade of old pine trees, two simple headstones stood side by side. On one was carved, Nathan Young, 1856–1929, beloved husband, father, and friend. On the other, Zelda Young, 1860–1939, beloved wife, mother, and friend. But what was not carved on the stones, what lived instead in the hearts of everyone who knew their story, was the truth of what they had meant to each other, and to everyone whose lives they had touched. They were proof that shame could be overcome, that love could heal, that kindness could transform lives. They were proof that sometimes, when everything seems darkest, all you need is someone to hold your hand and walk beside you through the storm. And in the end, that was the real story. Not about shame or redemption or even love necessarily. It was about the simple human need for connection, for someone to stand beside you and say, "You are not alone. I am here. We will face this together." That was what Nathan had given Zelda on that day when he rode beside her into Challies and held her hand. And it was what she had given him in return every day for the rest of their lives, the assurance that whatever came, they would face it together. That was the legacy they left behind. That was the story that would be told and retold for generations. The story of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built a love that lasted not just a lifetime but beyond, echoing through the years in the lives and loves of all the people who came after them. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the mountains and paints the sky in shades of gold and pink, people claim to see two figures standing on the hillside holding hands and looking out over the land they built together, well, who is to say it is not so? Love like that does not simply end when life does. It endures, a testament to the power of two people deciding to hold hands and face the world together, come what may.